Good evening, everybody. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being in time. And looking at Bangalore's weather, I think staying at home, hot pakoras, hot chai, and Netflix was our competition. I'm glad we won the competition, so thank you for being here. My name is Mamta Rajesh, and I'm the founder of Utsmaya Parenting. We offer parenting coaching programs to young parents. Over the last 23 years, I have worked as a psychotherapist, and the one pattern that I kept repeatedly seeing was that whatever was the adult issue that was being brought in for therapy was almost always emanating from the first decade of the person's life. And it used to leave me with an angst of, what can I do? How can I stitch my knowledge and experience together to help parents raise their child so that no child ever needs therapy? And that's what made me deal with my midlife existential crisis, and I turned entrepreneur at 50. And that's how I'm here. I'd like to introduce our very, very rich panel, and I assure you, you're going to go away with some valuable nuggets. You never thought what life or midlife crisis could have been. On my immediate right is Ambassador Lata Reddy. And of course, you would have all seen the introduction on the thing. She's been a career diplomat. She's been the Indian ambassador to Portugal, to Thailand. She's had a very interesting career. And what you don't know about her is that what she really wanted to be when she was young was to be a theatre actor. She's always loved the theatre and has acted in amateur plays in Mumbai, Lisbon, Kathmandu, and now heading the Bangalore Little Theatre Trust. Put your hands together for welcome her. And she was just saying that all her life she's been a diplomat and it's been a fantastic performance while doing that. On her right is our youngest gun, Akash Kumar. Besides being an IIT Madras alumni, Akash's claim to fame is being born a stone throw away from where his favorite author Orwell was. But unlike Orwell, one, he's quite optimistic about the world and the future, and two, quite verbose, so goes on talking. He takes a keen interest in all things tech, political economy, and futurism. He's best known for giving very personalized book recommendations. But for that, you have to bribe him with a good coffee, he says. Put your hands together for Akash, please. And on the extreme right, my dear friend, Samita Arni. Arni is very proud of having been the inspiration for the character of Ravi's irritating know-it-all sister in the Tinkle magazine series, Defective Detectives. She is also a slave to two cats, Chutki and Zen, and was forced into full-time employment, which entailed a commute of 4 hours a day by bus in order to keep feeding them premium quality food. Talk about cats being spoiled, she's to blame. Put your hands together for Happy. So right, to begin with, talking about quarter life, midlife, and late life crisis. We've all used Google Maps to get to somewhere, right? All of us have done that. Sometimes we use it to get to a place we know the way, but we use it still to find out the quickest route. Sometimes we use it when we have no idea how to get to a place. And I'm sure all of you can relate to a time when you've been using Google Maps, you're trusting it to get you there. You're just driving and out of the blue, without any warning, you hear the voice which says, GPS signal lost, right? And immediately there's a little panic. Oh God, what do I do? You restart your phone, flight mode, whatever, and you figure it out. And that's exactly what happens in life. We have a plan, we're going somewhere, something happens, life happens, we get derailed, and our GPS signal lost. And that's all it takes for an existential crisis to crop up. Midlife crisis, quarter life crisis, or late life crisis is nothing but an existential crisis. And I think the truth is, each of us go through it at least at one point of time or another. And here we are, Sam in her 30s, Akash in his 20s, Lata Reddy at 70 and myself at 50. We're going to give you a good peek into what existential crisis across life can be, and we hope you will take away some nuggets of how to navigate these tricky phases of life. Sam, I would like to start with you. I think the most commonly heard word is midlife crisis. Tell us what your understanding, and you're the closest to that phase. What's your understanding of midlife crisis? What do you make of it?
I think it's that exactly what you were saying, right? Suddenly the map goes dark, or the script that you've been living by suddenly sort of fizzles out, and you've realized you've achieved all of these things, all of these markers have occurred, and there is a structure and a way forward. But to follow that structure is either very hard, or it just doesn't feel real. So I think for me, I'm 39 and I'm going to be 40 in next year, and there was this moment where I had been so much committed to sort of earning a living as writer, making a certain kind of amount of money. And once I had hit that, I felt very empty. And I had realized in the pursuit of my career and ambitions, there had been something left behind. And at 39, I was on this moment where I wasn't going to be able to have children anymore. And there was this huge regret for the life that was not lived. And there was a really rich life that had been lived.
Yes.
But there was also certain things that were lost. And there was this huge questioning. Have I taken the right path? I'm somewhere now. How do I move forward from here? Do I really want to go forward on this career track?
Yeah.
And it is too late to go back and find that husband or have that child or whatever it is. What is it that I'm really missing? Is there a way I can bring that into my life going forward? So for me, that midlife was really, I've done certain things, but I've also had to lose out on other things. And I think in my case, you also feel it physically. There is this sense of the body, there is this unconscious processing in the body, a certain panic, a certain beepiness that starts to happen, particularly for women. I think when you realize you've hit that end of your childbearing years. And what is productivity, and how have you contributed really meaningfully to the world? So that was what it was for me. Yet I see in other friends of mine, both men and women, right? There are male friends of mine who've led astonishingly successful careers, and now they are saying, I'm not sure that was what I wanted after all. I've missed seeing my kids grow up.
Yes.
So that is another flip of that same crisis, and a regret.
Yes,
deep sense of regret.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what it is, right? A sense of evaluation of our life, and to recognize that, okay, some ships have sailed. I've missed some buses, and there is no option of a U-turn to go and catch that ship again. And that's the regret. Actually, the term midlife crisis as such was coined by this French gentleman called Iliad Jacques. I hope I got that pronunciation right. He coined this term in 1965. And he originally said, it is that time of your life when we really become aware of our own mortality. Meaning, well, we all generally live like we are never going to die, right? That's how we live. So the recognition that life is finite and probably half my life is over, have I made it count? And that is what can be the root of the trigger, and the trigger can be set off by any random event. It can be the death of a parent, which hits home that we are mortal. It can be a loss in business, a derailment in life, a calamity, loss, huge loss, a loss of identity, anything which can make me wonder, hey, did I get on the right path? What have I missed? What did I get? And that's what can trigger a crisis. Now, the thing to remember here is it doesn't always become a crisis. And while we've heard a lot about midlife, quarter life is something that is a new age term. And the first time I heard that, I remember thinking, quarter life, what have these kids even seen in life for them to have a crisis? Tell us about that, Akash.
Well, so when I told my friends that I'm going to speak about a quarter life crisis, people who know me.
Louder.
Okay, people who know me, that they exclaimed that, have you really had a crisis? What are you going to talk about, right? And to be honest, in any substantial sense of the term, I've not really had a life crisis, so I'm perhaps a little unsuited to talk about it, but I try my best. I do have had friends who have come to me seeking some advice on career, on relationships, on a bunch of different things, obviously. Both elder, younger, and people my age. And I think the one thing that encapsulates it really well, quarter life crisis in general, it's a very sort of a niche song that people don't know about. Even I had not heard of it actually. Well, I remember the line, so I googled it and I found this lyric. It says, "Come on, children, you're acting like children. Every generation thinks it's the end of the world." Right? So it's worries about not just personal life, but also about where the world is heading, right? Oh, we're living in the worst time, but it's contrary, to what facts speak. Bad things make news, good things don't. So that's one particular reason that we think the way we think. And I think, I mean, when you were talking about it, I figured that, yeah, like we do have a plan sometimes, but it really doesn't go through all the time. So we have to step back, change it. But I do think that it's very important to have a plan. Like, I think a lot of people, especially in my generation, including myself, obviously, perhaps, yeah, I don't think I'm any better, but we don't live consciously. We don't live, with a sense of where we're going. So we just let, it's like we are, think of it as perhaps a leaf in a river, right? It's going wherever the river is taking it. I don't think that's a great way to live. Perhaps I elaborate on it later.
Yes, we'll definitely come back to that. I think it's a very pertinent point of what you made. We'll definitely come back to that, Akash. Lata ma'am, your perspective when you look at all of this, the new age terms of quarter life crisis, or in fact, you would have also seen people who have encountered a crisis much later in life. Let me just take a quick poll here. How many people in the audience here who are below 30? Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay. People, you're going to get a lot of gems from these three brains here. Do listen. How many of you between 30 and 40? 40 to 50? 2, 3. 50 to 60? 60 and above? Great. I promise each of you that you will each get something valuable of the small, I think it's just wisdom of listening to our own intuition and living it. So do feel free to ask us questions, or we might have a dedicated Q&A section. But answer what your thoughts on midlife, quarter life crisis, and see if you can help all of them understand.
Well, I'm at a bit of an unfair advantage because I've been through my quarter life crisis. I've been through my midlife crisis, and I'm now in my late life crisis. But seriously, yes, life has been a series of challenges, and it always will be. But speaking specifically about later life challenges, let me say that I feel there's a lot to cope with as you grow older. Most of us retire from an active job, and that brings a sort of loss of position, of perks, of power, if those things are important to you. I have to say, it didn't matter much to me. I welcomed the freedom far too much. But the fact of the matter is, you also have to deal with many other things. Your health declines. There's more of an intimation of mortality, a stronger intimation of mortality. You're dealing with a lot of losses because people you know are passing away, they're leaving you, and there's a feeling of loneliness sets in, a feeling of being isolated. But there are also, excuse me, tools to deal with this. You have, you have an accumulated wisdom, and in a way, what I enjoy very much now is that I don't have those soaring highs that I had when I was young, yes, but I also don't have those terrible lows. You maintain more of an equilibrium in your life, which I think is very welcome. At this stage in life, I don't want to be always up in the clouds or down in the dumps. I want to be able to live my life in a serene manner, in a peaceful manner, and get some acceptance from what I see around me, and also freely share my views with people, share whatever experiences I've had, share whatever I've seen of the world, and I love to teach, to mentor, and I have to tell you, I'm still learning. I learn every single day. And if you don't keep that zest for life, if you don't keep that zest for learning, then you really lead a very sad life, and that's what we have to guard against. The very fact that so many of you over 60 are here today shows that you take interest, you want to come and listen to people, you want to interact with people, you want to be in a social group, you probably made a plan with friends or with family to be here. So I think these are the tools we have, the wisdom, the experience, but at the same time, yes, there are challenges as well. Thank you.
And yeah, a round of applause for that. I'd like to tie two things that both of you brought in. Akash was speaking about having a goal, a purpose, something to go after. It's okay if the goal changes, but it's important to have a goal. It's like if you need to use Google Map, you need to key in a destination. Without that, maps doesn't work. And one of the things I find, at the risk of sounding a little judgmental, some, especially younger people today, perhaps don't have the clarity of what is it that they're going after. It's living in the short term, not having a long-term plan and a goal, which can make it that they're choosing a certain stream of education. I'm finding that they're choosing a certain stream of education, and then 5 years, 10 years into working life, they realize that that's not what they wanted in the first place. And there's a huge shift, which is fine to shift, but it's an upheaval in their life of sorts, and that has a cost. You're getting to make the change, but there is a cost to bear. The cost can be in terms of time, life opportunities, etc. And the other thing what you said is not having the right skill set. Life is like a long road journey. It's like a long world tour you're doing, and you need to be skilled with a lot of life skills to be able to handle that. And what I'm seeing, Akash, is perhaps both those, that clear goal to go after. What do I want to be at 25, 30, 35, 40? Something to chase and to go after it with all you've got. That I see is less, and life skills. Probably one reason why there's a huge increase in instances of depression and anxiety among younger and younger people, which wasn't the case, say, maybe even 10 years ago, right? Of course, the pandemic made it worse, but I'd like to hear all of your thoughts on this. This is what I'm observing. Is this what you observe too, and what are your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Sam.
Yeah, I think there's also been this sense of, just go with the flow, try it out and see what happens. And I definitely had that mantra playing on in my head through a lot of things, right? Follow your passion, follow your dreams and see where they lead you, which is wonderful, but it also doesn't give you a structure or a plan.
Absolutely.
And so while I do believe follow your passion is great advice, also have to figure where that passion is taking you to.
Absolutely.
And I didn't have that. So particularly, I think when the pandemic hit, and there's almost the sense of, deep kind of, where are we going from here? You have to come up with a new plan.
Exactly.
And if you have at least a goal in mind, you can change the circumstances, you can change the way you reach it.
Yes.
You need to know where you're going. So for me now, what really prompted that midlife crisis was like, what is my life going to be at 50? What is my life going to be at 60? As I grow older and less, I'm more infirm and sicker, where is my support system? Who is my support system? None of these things I had rationally thought through before. But you really have to make that change now and say, I'm going to choose community, family, and relationships, because I think that's what's going to emotionally support me as I grow older. Emotionally and sort of in terms of infrastructure also support me as I grow older. It's less going to be about achieving that great career and all, because while that may give you a certain kind of money, that isn't going to give me that emotional satisfaction or that infrastructure that will really help me as I get older. So I think having that, really assessing where we want to be, we don't, the goalposts sometimes that society and culture give us are really not helpful. Get a certain car, buy a flat. It's not always advisable, even in the kind of current financial climate that we're living in, to do that. It's almost a tragedy or a failure if you've been living independently for many years and then you choose to move back home with your parents, as many did during the pandemic.
Yes.
But you might need to,
Yes.
and it's okay to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say actually is that it's all okay to go with the flow. It's great to follow your passion, but have a structure for that and make sure where you know where you want to be at the end of following that route. And adaptability.
And also know what your real values are. Is your real value success and achievement?
Yes.
Or does that come secondary to sort of family and relationships and community?
Or are you going after it because everybody in the world is going after it? Absolutely. I love what you said about finding alternative routes to get to where you want in case you don't get there in the first route you take, which is what Google Map does. You take a wrong turn or a road is blocked, it reroutes you. I think for us to have that skill developed at an emotional level, cognitive level, and to be able to think, decide, to learn those skills so that when we hit a dead end, we know how to take a detour. Because one thing for sure in life, we will hit dead ends, roadblocks. That's life. Akash, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a lot of food for thought. Okay, I might go on speaking, so you to rein me in. But I think with regards to career and I think follow your passion is obviously it's a cliched advice and people give that a lot of times, right? I think the way to look at it is it's a Venn diagram of two different things: something you're good at and something you really like. It should be an intersection of both. I might like playing guitar, I suck at it, right? People don't want to be in the same room. I should not be doing that. That definitely not as a career choice, right? So I think it's important to recognize that. That's one. And the other, with regards to future, and this is something which is going to change. And Ambassador Reddy, she was in the same work for most of her latter life, and she was definitely in a government job, but even otherwise, people who worked at, I think, TCA, Tata, or private companies back in the days were perhaps in the same job throughout their life, throughout their rest of the life. That's not going to be true. Anytime soon. Like if you look at the US, it's a more dynamic economy. People change their jobs once a year on an average. That's an average, right? That's going to be the case. With AI and everything, what you studied at the university might not even be very useful. So it's very important to be constantly learning, reskilling yourself. And one thing is that we're gonna see, this is discomforting. This is perhaps gonna be the most discomforting thing in the next 10, 20 years, but we're gonna see a hollowing out of middle income jobs. Jobs that are clerical. They're not gonna exist. The jobs at the bottom will exist because it's tougher to automate them, more expensive to automate them, doesn't make sense. Jobs at the top, not gonna be automated. But middle clerical jobs will be automated. But it might free you up to, perhaps pursue something artistic, creative, as a profession as well, because people will put more of a premium to it. Otherwise, yeah, apart from that, like life is not a sprint. This is something which is very cliche, but I think it's true that it's a marathon, right? And that is something that people my age seem to forget all the time, right?
What do you think they're doing wrong there? They're not recognizing that it's a marathon. What are they looking at it as?
Two different things. One is other people, right, who achieve, and I mean, I went to an IIT, I think one of my classmates is somewhere there at the back, right? A lot of, like, you go perhaps from a school where you are one of the, smartest kids, and you go there and everybody is smart, right? And this is like everybody is smart, and you perhaps, if you are not adjusting to that, if you feel insecure, right, you can't survive in that place. You might do much worse because you have a new insecurity. And the things that you hear about suicides at IIT and everything, I think there's a lot that administrations there can do, but there is a lot that kids at school need to be taught, because it's you need to be able to adapt to that situation. Take a pause whenever you feel that you're losing out. Take a pause, reflect, introspect. And the other thing is, I mean, I perhaps come back to it later, but I think jealousy is a useless emotion, and I'd perhaps
We shall come back to that later.
we'll come back to that later. Yeah.
Ambassador Lata, what's your thought on all of
Well,
this?
I, in a sense, agree with Akash. Even in my time, when I was young, I went through a lot of choices. I said, what do I want to be? One was to do my PhD and get into academia. One was to join the private sector. In fact, I applied to and was accepted by the Indian Institutes of Management. And the last was really to do the government services. And I was very loath to actually join the government because my father had been in the IAS and I knew how much adaptation was required. And believe it or not, I was a bit of a wild child, I mean, I didn't see myself fitting into a bureaucratic structure at all. So I said, oh God, all these restrictions and what you have to wear and how you have to behave and calling everybody sir and ma'am and blah, blah, blah and all. I'm not sure that's really what I want to do. But with a bit of arm twisting from my dad, I agreed to write the exam. But I made it clear, I said it'll be my choice whether I choose academia, the corporate life, or this. It's finally my choice depending on what materializes. So he said, fine. So I took a year off. I prepared for all these various exams, and then finally I got everything. I got a fully paid scholarship to go abroad to do my PhD. I got into the Indian Institutes of Management. I got into the Bajaj Institute and a couple of the IIMs. And I got into the Foreign Service, which was my only choice because I said I can't bear the IAS. Too many compromises to be made there, and so once I had all the three choices, the question was which do I choose? And the reason I chose what I did was very simple. I chose it because it was basically I could either take it now or never. Because you couldn't get your first choice and say no. If you did that, you were barred from taking the exam again. If you got your second choice, yes, you could have said no. But so, in a sense, I've been through what Akash was talking about, like floundering a bit, saying, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And so on. But ultimately, after about 2 years of very difficult adjustments, I have to tell you, and I was a bit of a square peg in a round hole. So either I got rounder or the peg got squarer. I don't know what it was. I mean, the hole got squarer. So Finally, I turned out to be a perfect fit, but there were 2 years where I used to regularly threaten to resign. I was so fed up with the bureaucracy. They wouldn't give me leave. They would raise all kinds of silly objections. When I spoke French and German, they insisted on giving me Portuguese. I said, this is a mad system. I can't survive in this system. So yes, but once having found that purpose, once having made that adjustment, yes, Akash, you're quite right. I stuck with it for nearly 40 years. And I loved it. It was a wonderful career, and it gave me not just security, it gave me the opportunity to see the world, it gave me a whole lot of things. So I would steer a path somewhere between the two. Yes, you should have the flexibility. What I tell young people and anybody really at any stage in their life is, yes, follow your dream as long as it'll take you. And when you feel that no longer fulfills you, you have the right and you can make a change. That will be my message to everyone, really. And I've made a tremendous change in my life, in my late life. And I love it. I love my new life. I've never been happier in my life. Because the kind of freedom I have, the kind of things I do, the kind of things I can talk about, the kind of travel I've done, has been wonderful and nothing like what I was doing earlier. So it's a very optimistic note to end on, but there I am.
I'll just come back to what you said about jealousy being a useless emotion. How many of you believe jealousy is a useless emotion? Can I have a show of hands? Useless emotion. How many of you believe jealousy is a useless emotion?
Jealousy.
Jealousy, alright. How many of you believe that jealousy it's an emotion, neither good nor bad. It's telling you what you're missing in life. Yeah, we're the majority. There's one thing I find interesting about jealousy here. Whether we are looking at quarter life, young folk, 20s, 30s, or 40s, midlife, late life, there's this element of actually comparing to others, and I think social media has made it 100 times worse, right? Everybody believes everybody else is living the perfect life, or at least most people look at other people's social media handles and believe they have the perfect life. I don't. And then therein starts the jealousy. That might be for the younger generation. I recently had a WhatsApp forward which said that high school reunions, your school reunions at around the age of 40 has got nothing to do with meeting and catching up with you. They just want to know whether you made it in life or not. And it's actually, in a way, that's what a lot of people are gauging, right? Did you make it in life? And there's that element of jealousy which can crop in again. And then later in life too, 50s, 60s, 70s, there are people who still are comparing and saying, look at that person, they got this, they did this, you didn't let me do that, I couldn't do this, etc., etc. And I find that jealousy is actually something that goes on no matter what life stage you are in. But tell me, how is it influencing the younger folk and what social media is doing to their mind?
So, people who did not raise their hands, I'm going to try to, for the next 2-3 minutes, I'm going to try to change your mind. And I hope I'm successful, right? And I'm going to start with what Sam pointed to. I think you talked about buying a car, right? Buy a car if you really like cars. Buy a great car if you really like cars. Buy a normal car if you need, one for utility purpose. Don't buy a car because somebody else, would think of you as cool or, as, having made it, if you had it. So I think we live for others. When people say that you're so selfish, I usually look at that person and I see that they're not really selfish. They're actually living for others because they're living, thinking what others think of them rather than what they think of themselves. So do not replace self-esteem with what others think of you. And obviously this might sound a little impractical, but believe me, it's not. And a lot of people will tell you that jealousy is drastically it corrodes your emotional health, clouds clarity, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, bunch of other things. But I'm gonna dial it a little bit back and not talk about those things. Perhaps try to tie it up with economics or with more more of how the world works. Right? I think jealousy has its seeds in something very different. We look at the world as a fixed pie. In most cases, that's not true. So if someone has something, it does not mean that you automatically have less of that. Okay? In some cases it's true, in most cases it is not. Most important things in life are not fixed. Again, the pie fallacy in society, it reflects in different ways. The rich get rich by taking money from the poor. I don't believe that's true, but I'm not going to get into that. I think the way it gets ingrained is because the way the way we grow up as kids. When we're kids, your sibling, if there's a fixed cake, right? Like there's only one cake, so either you get it or your sibling gets it, or you get half of it. So it's basically a zero-sum game. But most people, even smart people, don't grow out of that. The world does not work that way. You create value, right? When you're working in an economy, you create value. It's something. Think of it as an old car, and I decided to wash it, maybe put something, some new equipments in it, and then sell it. Otherwise, it would have sold for say $400. Now it sells for $1,000. I added that $600 value. Right? So it's not a fixed pie, it grows. So if you start looking at the world in that way, I think that's perhaps helpful even with JLC. Yeah, again, I mean, this is perhaps a tangent, but natural resources again also are, I don't think, fixed. We could talk about that later. It's not a zero-sum game.
Akash, tell us specifically about what you think social media is doing to young people who are image conscious or trying to unconsciously comparing themselves to us. What's the role of social media in the quarter life crisis?
Right. Nobody posts crying pictures of themselves on social media. Right?
Yes.
But people cry. People have tension. People are worried about 5 different things. And I don't think people should, by the way, don't get me wrong. People should not do that, maybe. Or if you want to, you could go ahead and do that. But the point is that when you look at other people's Instagram, be conscious that they're putting the best feet forward, that they're projecting not necessarily a perfect life, but a better life than they're really living. And that's true for all of us, every one of us. Think of your Instagram also, perhaps, right? You put up things when you travel, right? You're not always traveling. Perhaps I travel like a month and a half in a year, but I use Instagram. I realized this, when we were talking the other day, that I use Instagram much more when I'm traveling.
Yes.
So yeah, that's definitely one. People also look at other people's pictures and traveling, doing other things, and they get jealous because they think that that's the life they are living, and I'm not. I think that's. But I don't think the answer is always detox. People say that detox from social media.
And they come back with a bang. So you're back and catching up all that you missed. So it doesn't really work.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. One, you need to basically
Mind shift.
that.
Yeah. Yes.
The thought.
Yes, please do. That's my.
I must just say that I'd like to differentiate between jealousy and envy. There is a big difference. Jealousy, you sort of are either very possessive of a person, and envy on the other hand is where you want what that person has. And envy, I think, sometimes can actually be positive.
Absolutely.
Because it can make you think of how can I be better? How can I be like them? How can I be the best version of myself? And I think that's very important.
Absolutely. I think even with jealousy, Ambassador Lata, I think it's a normal human emotion.
Yeah.
It just, if I love your black sari and I'm jealous that you have a black sari
Yeah.
and I love it,
Yeah.
how I respond to the jealousy can be good or bad.
Yeah.
I can either steal your black sari or go out and buy my own black sari. So how I respond
Yeah.
to jealousy or envy. But what we see happening, I think, would you say this is something that affects even 50 plus and 60 plus generation?
Absolutely.
Tell
I
us
mean,
your
in
thoughts on that.
professional envy, for instance, in the career, I think it really becomes terrible at that age.
And how does that impact late life crisis?
Well, I think how it impacts is that it depends now on how you behave when you feel those emotions, right? If you are a decent colleague, if you've behaved well during your working career, I think you generate an enormous amount of goodwill. So in your later life, like till today, if I go to an embassy, you know, the youngsters whom I've worked with are so happy and they say, ma'am, you have to come and stay with us. We want to look after you. Of course, you can't travel by public transport. We want to send a car for you. Other colleagues of mine who've been very nasty bosses, you know, really not been positive towards their juniors, get a very cold reception. I mean, they'll do the necessary, but just formality.
So I'm thinking that it can, how you are, how you deal with these emotions, can later on impact your sense of loneliness or your sense of belonging with the larger society.
See, because if you've been generous in your career, if you've given people credit, if you've helped youngsters to flourish and grow, you know, and not sort of said, oh, I want all the credit for myself, I'm going to steal your work and pass it off as mine.
Yes.
People see through that very easily, you know, young people, and they remember it.
Absolutely.
They remember it for life, and they'll never forgive you. That's the thing.
Absolutely. So one thing that's emerging for me from what we are all talking is that regardless of what age group a person is, it's very important to work towards preparing ourselves for the next decade and for the next life stage. It's like how children go, you send your child to kindergarten and then primary school, middle school, high school, college, to prepare them for the adult working life. I think in a very similar way, there are a set of skills that one needs to be prepared to deal with life. And life can throw bouquets or brickbats, right? And none of us came with a guarantee card that life will be problem-free when we were born. So lack of those skills, not being prepared, not being adaptable when life throws something at us, can really trigger off a quarter life crisis. People who have large family businesses that they're coming from, and they're grouped to take on the family business. And I found that young people who've gotten into the family business are unhappy. They really wanted to be doing something else, but they didn't do that. And then it's a crisis because they're stuck in a rut. People who are in their late 30s, early 40s, who hit a midlife crisis because they realized they wanted something completely different. And here they are, and there, like I said earlier, there is no option of a U-turn. Or people who are in 60s and 70s who haven't prepared themselves to deal with the challenges and the unique needs of late life. At every step, if we are not preparing for the next decade of life or the next life stage, I find that a crisis is just around the corner, whether we call it quarter life, midlife, late life, whatever. What are your thoughts on these? I'll start with you. I'll come this way. I'll start with you, Basantha.
Yeah, I think you're right, because very, very important to prepare ahead. I mean, obviously, financial security is very important, and if you don't have the financial security, then really everything else pales into insignificance because you're so busy trying to figure out how you're going to survive. These days we all live so long, so you have to plan ahead, assuming that you might live into your 90s.
Yes.
Who's going to look after you? How are you going to be cared for?
Yes.
And I think the other, we're talking about skill sets here,
Yes.
right?
Yes. I'm saying it's very important to prepare ourselves with the skills that we need for each forthcoming decade.
Exactly. And I think the other thing we have to do is say that where do I want to be in 10 years?
Absolutely.
and how do I reach that goal,
Yes.
right? And I think it's a good idea to just look at 10 years rather than a longer span, because it's hard to plan so far ahead.
Yes.
But 10 years I think is fair, and say this is what I want to achieve by the time I'm this age,
Yes.
So I think that would be an important
Yes,
thing
I
to
think
do.
financial planning is very, very important.
Yeah.
What would you say, you've lived the whole span, and what would you say one needs to do to be socially, to feel belonged and to not hit that loneliness in
I
life?
think very important to have a good social structure in terms of supportive family where you have one, and maintain those links with them. Even if they may not geographically be in the same city, you need to speak often, fix a time when you're going to FaceTime with them or WhatsApp with them or whatever you want to do. And and if you're lucky enough to have family in the same city, make sure you schedule time together. Say at least once a week we should all get together. I'm very lucky because I have my siblings living in the same city and we meet very often.
Lovely.
And so I think that's very important. Family, friends, and you need a social network of the people. I've said this before, but when we belong to an organization like BIC, when we start to actually come to all these events, when we start to interact, when we come up with ideas, and when we have events and which we all enjoy attending, that's a way to be engaged. And
Yes.
I see so many friends in the audience whom I know have got diverse interests. They've worked very hard towards establishing wonderful creative institutions. Now that gives you a sense of purpose.
That's a focus.
A sense of
Absolutely.
purpose in life.
Absolutely. Something to look forward to, creating something. So, having a purpose, financial planning
Yeah.
for a future, secure future, and being socially active and relevant.
And relevant, and family and friends.
Yeah.
Good structure, real people who really care about you.
Akash, what would your thoughts be on how to stay relevant in the workspace with the way the world is set to change and what AI is poised to do in our life? For both young people, 20s, 30s, and 40s, what would your thoughts be on how can they stay relevant and maintain the right skill set and upgrade that in the changing world, to not feel like you spoke about the middle sector job going, right? Mid-level jobs which will get automated and go. What is your piece of advice for folk out there to keep the axe sharpened?
For all three
All the three age groups.
different.
Yes.
For all three age group. Okay. So I mean the one that's perhaps I think common across is be nimble, right? Don't give up learning. Just because you graduated from college doesn't mean that done. You don't need to learn anything new. You need to learn new things every day, honestly, and that's something that I think is key. That's one. Okay, another thing. I'm just going back to the discussion because it's. I agreed with everything on JLC that everyone said. And when you said that you like Ambassador Reddy's black sari and you want it, I believe in abundance, and I think if she wants black sari, she can also get it. Ambassador Reddy having one doesn't mean that there is one less of it. There will be one more produced if she wants it.
I wish everyone believed in and thought that way. God bless you for that, Akash.
Yeah.
Going back, people in 20s, I think my generation, living independently is very important. Don't live with your parents, honestly. Not because you don't love them. I absolutely love my parents, but I would not have been independent. I'd not have come this far had I lived with them. Not just so I'm fortunate enough to be born and brought up in a very small town, so I had to leave if I had to do anything. But even if you live in Bangalore, honestly, try to pick a college somewhere else, and try to convince your parents to let you go. there's a sculptor by the name Himatsa, I think he's dead now, but he said, "We'll live too carefully. Students should be daring, bold, and free." Right? So it doesn't mean that you have to be irresponsible, but basically explore things. That's how you know what you like. I talk to a lot of kids in school who say that they don't know what they should do. Once they graduate school, what should they pick? And
What do you think is the reason for that? It's not lack of intelligence or ability to think. What do you think? Why are they not in full touch with their own thoughts and feelings or desires?
yeah, so I earlier used to say that oh, don't go by what your parents are telling you to do. Don't go by what your peers are doing. Think for yourself. Think independently. But the problem is that they've not explored enough. So you need to do that when you're in school. You need to do that when you're in college, and you need to do that, I think, throughout your life, honestly. But the advice to people in 40s is not about people in 40s, and pardon me for that. But this is about kids, if they have any. Don't be overprotective. Indian parents are very overprotective. Let young people be independent. And there's a quote that I'm using from a column. This is not mine. Again, this is from a column Manu Joseph wrote. And there is some, political talk in this. But it's not about politics. So don't pick up on that and come to me. We are all raising Rahul Gandhis. Even chowkidars who have scorn for Gandhi raise their own children to be him. On this aspect of parenting, there is no polarization. Everyone admires Modi. Everyone is raising Rahul Gandhis at home. They raise kids who have never taken public buses or eaten real street food. They may not have Indian bugs in their gut. They speak the language of their parents very poorly. That is, if they speak it at all. They've never talked to the poor, only instructed them. They've always traveled in a car, watching a menacing nation pass by, reading at traffic lights. They're filled by their parents with terrors of life and all that can go wrong. As they grow older, they will be even more protected in less obvious but more substantial ways. That's concerning.
I think what you said about being Indian parents being overprotective, I think it's a double whammy because an overprotected child, a lot of the times quarter life crisis can occur because they've come from a privileged or a protected or privileged and protected home environment, and when they go out and encounter life, and if life is not so kind, it's triggered some sort of a crisis. May not be a quarter life because they have difficulty adjusting to the real life and what real world people can be like. And for the parents who are extremely overprotective or controlling the decisions of children, when the children do finally leave home, which is around the time when the parents are in their 40s, the emptiness and sudden lack of purpose can trigger a midlife crisis for them too. One of the triggers is the empty nest syndrome for a midlife crisis. So what I'm hearing you say, Akash, is that your two bits is be a lifelong learner, keep learning, be nimble, and adapt to the changing work scenario, and that's what will keep you on your feet and adaptable. Sam, you've also trained to be a therapist. What would you say is the emotional needs a person needs to take care of or attend to at an emotional level to prevent a quarter life, midlife, or a late life crisis?
Firstly, I'm not sure we can entirely prevent it. As Akash was saying, he was saying that you should bring up your kids to be independent, which is exactly what my parents did. My mother took me into a bus at 12 and said, "Here is a public bus," and that was that was how I started traveling on public buses, which was a very useful life lesson. Thank you. She's there in the audience. And they sent me off to study on my own when I was 16. And at some point, I did come back and I actually lived with them afterwards. And I lived with my family afterwards. And that too, readjusting to the family was a hugely great learning experience,
Yes.
particularly after being independent, of how we have to reestablish a relationship. And so I'm not also entirely against people going back to live with their parents or their families. I think that can be very valuable and enriching for both. But from the point of view of being someone who is trained in therapy, I think one of the great realizations for me is to also allow myself to experience my negative emotions and to understand what those are telling me, whether that's envy, whether that's jealousy, whether that's anger. As a girl, I almost feel like I was socially conditioned not to allow myself to feel angry or even express that. But allowing myself to admit, hey, here I feel angry. It may not be getting angry at somebody, but here's angry and it's not gone away, and I need to think about where this is coming from and how do I solve for this.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like one of the things I think has really helped me is creativity. Because we are all living life out of the box. I think that both Akash and my generation, we're not going to have regular pensions. We're going to live odd structures where we might get married, get divorced, have a live-in relationship, have children with a couple of different partners, and our families are also going to, or not have children at all, which is my case, and our families are going to look very different. So it is always about choosing creativity or finding new ways to accommodate to that openness of mind that creativity is really emerges from is really necessary. So even for me, I was talking about this realization of not having children, and I remember meeting my friends' kids, and then feeling, both a sense of anger, and it was a bunch of confusing emotions. Also a sense of gratitude because I've never had to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, or have to sit with someone while they study for an exam. Very grateful for not having that. But I have missed something, and how do I now compensate for that in my life? And it has been, it's strange once you have that question in your mind. It's almost like life provides you opportunities to find different answers. And recently I was at my college reunion, which luckily no one was comparing anything, and we all at the end of it posted pictures of ourselves crying on our WhatsApp because we wanted to be 17 again, and life is not going to go that way. But I met a lot of my, and I haven't seen my friends for 20 years, but I met their children. And I can't tell you what a connection and a sense of ownership, because I felt for these kids. And I said, I was loving these kids, and now I've made plans next year. I'm going to go to Germany, I'm going to go to Estonia to meet these kids again. And this is a way I can enjoy a little bit of something that I have missed out on. And I haven't missed out on it in time.
Yes. I think that's so valuable what you said, that if I don't get it in the way I want it or desired it, life almost always will give you that in another way at another time. And it's almost like life is testing us to ask, if you get it in another form at another time than what you had desired, do you still know how to enjoy it and savor it? And I think that's something, it's a choice we have to make, right? Whether I can be bitter and say, oh, I didn't get it when I wanted, so I'm going to be bitter, or can I learn to receive it? And I loved what you said, Sam, about life will bring disappointments. I wonder where this belief that gets formed in each of us, how much of it is contributed by movies, fairy tale stories, that life always ought to be nice and pleasant and beautiful. And that's one thing that life isn't always guaranteed to be, right? So, do you suppose, and I'd like to hear from all three of you again, if, say, in school, every child was taught some basic life skills and, helped to understand their own emotions, including dealing and accepting disappointment, learning how to handle failure, learning how to motivate themselves intrinsically. If these life skills are taught in school, do you suppose people can grow up better equipped to deal with life's disappointments? And perhaps that would reduce greatly, at least, the chances of a crisis. Existential crisis is a given in everyone's life. Upsets, derailments in life, 100% guaranteed in everyone's life. Do you think if these skills are taught in school, perhaps, it would make a difference,
I'm not sure that a formal course would be useful, but certainly I think a good school should have a counselor available for children to talk to, who's well trained and who can recognize the dilemmas that children are going through and give them good advice. I think parents should be open to the idea of seeking help or therapy when the child needs
And
it.
also the parents need to be open to the idea of not having a perfect child, not having to be the perfect parent.
Absolutely, because the unfortunately the Indian educational system has placed so much emphasis on competition and doing well. I mean, in a way, I was very lucky because when I went to school, it wasn't such a competitive system. Provided you got into a good school, it was fairly easygoing, and I was bright enough to pass my exams. I didn't have a big problem and just went on to a good college, and then everything was easy for me. I think today's world is
Yes,
very different.
very
Kids are under so much pressure. You have to get 99% to get into university. It's ridiculous.
You have to look a certain way, you have to dress a certain
And
way.
there's a lot of peer pressure which wasn't there in my time. We were all accepted as we were. In our peculiarities, whatever they were. We wore uniforms, so there was no great difference between any of us. Now it's a very, very competitive environment these children are in. So yes, I think they do need guidance, they do need counseling, and they need parents who are aware and who will get them the help when they need it.
Absolutely. Your thoughts on that, Akash?
I think it's important to teach both. There needs to be a balance. There is competition in life. That's the reality. And I would not even say that that's a cruel reality, because you know what? Even if you lose out somewhere in the competition, you're going to be fine.
Yes.
Realize that. So I think kids need to be, what I talk about what you said earlier, kids need to be taught that failure, taught that people fail, and then you can get up and, win again. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but I watched a clip, I think earlier today, where, not gonna take a name, only a few people would know anyway. He said that people in schools, the fact that you're giving out participation trophies and saying that everybody's a winner, is basically setting kids, small kids, to not be able to fail later, because they never feel the sense of failure. They never learn how to tackle failure. They never learn how to go back and try to win. I think there's some truth in it. And apart from that, what needs to be taught in the schools are again very, very different. But I think some sort of a logic 101 needs to be taught in either school, high school, or first semester in college.
Absolutely.
Where you are taught how to think clearly and how to reason things out.
Yes.
I think even people who study liberal arts, by the way, the problem is that the way their worldview works is, what my friend is thinking, what my professor is telling me, what someone else, not thinking independently. And I think thinking independently is very, very, very important.
Very
It's a key.
Absolutely.
And I think we're not taught how to do that in schools, in colleges, throughout the entire educational system. And I agree with Ambassador Reddy on that. Other thing is economics, but then again, I am very interested in economics. I'm very passionate about economics, but I think teaching economics and teaching personal finance in school,
Yes, very true.
in first semester of college, very, very important, because people grow up, people are 30, 25, 30, and they're still not saving, they're still not investing, they're still not thinking about financial security. So I think that's very important.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think basics in psychology and learning about self-esteem, learning how to set boundaries, and basic financial planning. I think these are valuable assets for life.
It doesn't need to be formal course as already said.
Yeah.
It just needs to be incorporated, taught by, parents, maybe teachers,
Yes.
in school, in college, wherever.
Yes. Sat, what would you like to add to this?
I think one thing, this competition mindset, which is what brews to the jealousy, which what also leads to the feeling of having missed out on because you're racing ahead. We don't, I think we really need to change it because, also everyone is a winner is a problem, but we win with others. We win for others. Yes, it's good to win for myself once in a while, but after a point it gets kind of lonely that I'm just winning there for me and my now very fat cats because they eat really like highly expensive food. But there is a limit to how much you can win, and loneliness sometimes is more dangerous and more painful than losing. The reality of winning, and I've won a couple of times in my life, so I feel like I can say this, is that it lasts for maybe a day, the high that you get. And yes, it does impact your life, but it's not going to give you that same feel-good hormone that you get from having watched a terrible movie with your family and all laughed and all hated it together, right? That sometimes is a more valuable for your emotional life.
Emotional health.
I think what we need to teach kids in school, and this is linked to thinking clearly, is also how to feel what they are feeling. Because once you acknowledge to yourself that you don't like this, then you can think of a solution for that, or you might think what has caused that sense of dislike or hate or disagreement or whatever, disappointment. But we also need to feel for ourselves and be emotionally independent, perhaps even before we are intellectually independent. The third thing is that life is not linear, and we really need to teach this. There are women who are, having their children having left home are now becoming very successful entrepreneurs. That is an option. You might be bankrupt and debt-ridden in your 20s, but you may not be so in your 40s. There are so many different ways of living life that are not your linear path models. You might be a millionaire in your 30s and be very unhappy in your 50s. So we have to have a variety of different role models that we expose children to as well. Right now it's very, Elon, we all want to be like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. No, I don't want that. I want to be like the school teacher who's now, brought tons of kids and taught them to read and is invited to every family celebration. That's who I want to be. And we need to talk more about those kinds of role models.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me about what both of you said is about giving participation certificate to every child and saying every child is a winner. I just realized I grew up in a school environment where only the winners got the certificates. And there was a certain emotion the winners felt, and there was a certain emotion the losers, quote-unquote losers, felt. There's a price to pay, there's a consequence, there's disappointment. Do it the other way, where you give a participation certificate and say every child is a winner. Are you taking away the hunger to, push themselves to do more? That also has a cost. So whichever way we look at it, whatever we choose, whether every child is a winner or only the winners are winners, there's a price to pay, there's a consequence that follows. I think that's so true with life. No matter what choice we make, this career or that city I want to live in, there's a price, there's a consequence. And it's inevitable that if I've made 100 choices, that maybe for 20 of those choices there will be regret. I will feel that, damn, I should have done the other thing, or I should have done more of this or less of that. And I think it really comes down to learning how to make peace with my losses in life. And I'm not talking financial losses here. Loss of time, loss of opportunity, loss of relationships, everything. And I wonder if, like how CAs, they have their profit and loss and that hisab kitab that happens end of the financial year. And then you write it all off, close what is a bad debt, and you finish at the end of that financial year and then start a new bookkeeping. I think we need to learn to do that with life, with every life stage. Deal with whatever has been the sadness, the loss of the previous life stage, and not let it linger to the next stage, because it really can take away. We bring in bitterness from the previous stage, anger, jealousy, all of that. I think that's really what you were saying, that life will throw disappointments. How are you going to respond to it? What choice are you going to make course corrections? Like exactly Google reroutes when we make a wrong turn. Are we going to be adaptable? That's really what I'm taking from what all of you said. We're going to start wrapping up. If there are any questions any of you have to the panelists here, just feel free to raise your hand and ask. Yes, please. Sir.
I want to ask all three of you, when you look back, do you have any regret?
To paraphrase the song, regrets, I have a few. You remember? But then again, too few to mention. Because overall, no. You know, I lived a life which has been very fulfilling. I have very few regrets.
Not too many, I guess. But the way I look at it is that sometimes, we say that don't cry over, spilled milk. Sometimes you can go back and course correct. Sometimes you can, change course. Basically, obviously, you can't go back in time, change the decision. But I think life allows you that much flexibility. So a lot of young people again think that a decision they took is basically going to determine the rest of their life. I don't think that's true. So that perhaps.
I think also something that has to be acknowledged is that we're changing as people. What we want at 20 is very different from what we want at 40, and then when we look back at 40 and say, at 20 I should have done that. So I remember when I was at 22, I came and lived with my grandmother for 4 years. It was one of the most fulfilling and important times. But when I was 27, I was like, damn, I've started that career. Everyone else has paid off their college loans. I haven't made any money. I'm kind of broke. And yet now I'm like, no, it was absolutely the right decision to have made at 24 to live with my grandmother and have those beautiful years with her. And I feel very privileged by that. So now I'm not sure if I completely believe in regret. I think if it is an emotion, but once you sit there with it, you'll find another solution. So for example, I talked about my solution regarding children. The other regret is that I haven't been disciplined enough because I haven't written enough for all the kids that I know. And now that's the next goal for me. That I need to be more disciplined and write more. And somehow manage that with my existing career. So I feel like regret is useful. In some ways it can be a blessing in disguise.
I think regrets also give us an opportunity to course correct. It's calling your attention to make course corrections. Yes, sir.
We were talking about what life has to throw at you, which sometimes is good, sometimes not good. I think it's a matter of perspective. I don't think we draw enough from our ancient scriptures and the Vedas and the Gitas, etc. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Okay, just to give you an example, if I don't know if you believe this or not, but let me just say it. If your soul chooses to be born in a particular family and to have a certain kind of life, then you have the right perspective there right away, because you know that it's all about evolution. Your soul chooses that in order to evolve. So the evolution comes out of experiences, good and bad. Okay? So as you go through life and have these experiences, and you have the right perspective, then you're not bothered. I mean, you're not crisis.
Yes.
There's no crisis.
Yes. I loved what you said. Thank you so much. I think if one has a karmic viewpoint and believes in the karma theory, and then I say, okay, this is what I'm meant to go through, there's a learning in it for me, then it's not a crisis. But if I'm not subscribing to that, it can become that. And I really agree with what you said, that we are not tapping into our Indic wisdom enough. That's one regret I have, that I didn't teach my children enough of our culture and the thing. And I missed the time when I could have taught them that by taking them to the right class or whatever. And that's a U-turn I don't have the option to make now. So all I can do is, I'm being a student in that myself now, and my hope is that by watching me, they'll probably one day become students themselves. So yes, regrets, I think regret gives us an opportunity to course correct, I genuinely believe. I think regrets, all of us will have some or the other. Our aim is to make it fewer, I think. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Just to answer your question, don't worry about that regret. The kids will have the time and they will learn what they need to learn. So stay with the karmic theory. Okay.
I'll do that.
So take care of that mountain for you. I'll write a book.
So there are a couple of this is vanished, can't get into it. No, those are very fun. Actually, first of all, fascinating listen to you all. To understand what impacts you, what impacts you, what impacts me, what so many similarities all of us have, and there are enough differences. There was a quote from Dalai Lama which I was just writing about, that self-confidence is so important for success for the future. And the problem is half the time we're looking at the next person and competing and trying to be that. And that is preventing us from what we can be. And if you focus on what you can be, then this jealousy is not just vanish. They're non-existent. Two things I think have got skipped as a gap is, you mentioned the GPS tells you to change the route. GPS does not tell you when to change destination. And that is something which experience comes. How adaptable are you? What are you looking at? And be prepared for that. At that time, do not have regrets or miss the bus. Secondly, is a fascinating line from these guys, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And that's a capability which we need to build. If you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with.
Yeah.
We always keep saying, I wish I had perfect planning. Sorry, life doesn't give you an even hand. But what you have, how will you make sure you're giving the best to it? And that is when you start loving the one you're with.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Dear Akash, I would ask you one thing. See, I mean, hearing all your respectable words, Arjuna was having one particular goal, that was DOS system. But today DOS doesn't work. We have to be, in Windows. It's not only one goal. We have to have many goals and looking at the other goals. Is it, how do we really change to Windows nowadays? See, man-made machines can change, switch to Windows, but we are not man-made. So how do we switch to Windows?
What do you mean by Windows?
Windows system, computer system.
Just the computer system.
Just computer system Windows. Many goals, and all other problems, all other incomings.
Yeah.
From what I understand, people have professional lives, people have, their personal lives, people have a lot more going on, passion and everything. I think it's more important to focus not on goals, but on habits. There's a wonderful book on it, this is not my idea. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you build habits that take you closer to where you want to be, and it's multifaceted, as you said very rightly, it's multifaceted. It's not just one thing that I want from life and I'm done, right? Because if that's the case, then when I get that one thing, there'll be a void in my life, right? Like, where do I go from here? So I think it's very multifaceted, and it's important to build habits that take you closer to where you want to be. Something I'm also very bad at, imperfect at, still learning. But if you get better 1% every day, even 0.5% every day, the cumulative, the compound interest of it is really going to reap rewards in a year, 2 years, 3 years, a decade in life, I think.
Can I just say something? Sometimes I feel like now it's not so much pursuing goals. It's rather than thinking of where I want to go, it's more like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be kinder? Do I want to be, nicer? Do I want to be more stronger in myself? Who do I want to be rather than?
Or do I just want to be me?
True.
Ma'am, do you get this feeling at your age, what Sam mentioned?
Who do I want to be? Uh, yes and no. I mean, I'm pretty sure of who I am and which direction I'm heading. But yes, at times I wonder what the future will hold. And is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? And do I have the skills to deal with whatever's going to come my way? But then I have to tell you that, I have had a lot of role models in my life. And I've seen them grow old very graciously and very happily. And I hope I can be like them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So first of all, I want to thank for arranging this beautiful theme of quarter, mid and late life. And the representatives of those ages are in front of us and they have shared their experiences. It's beautiful. These discussions are very enriching for me and I thank you for that. So, and now about the sharing that I wanted to make. There is a question also, but probably it will end with sharing. So the question is, अजब दुनिया जारिया कहाँ है, जान पड़ियो नाये मैं का आगे के पाछे रे. That's the one bandish from in the classical music that I have heard. Isn't it a very rhetorical question, right? अजब दुनिया जारिया कहाँ है, जान पड़ियो नाये मैं का आगे के पाछे रे. Okay, whether the world is moving forward or backward, whether it is deteriorating, even using the term that Akash used, abundance. Yes, there is abundance of problems also. That every generation have said that they had good times and the current times are bad. So, in such situations, when every now and then, in this complex world and complex system, different challenges, different situations will keep coming up. So how to deal with these kind of situations? How much can we prepare? Is it everything predictable? When I even look at social media, it is so new to the world in the overall large span of time in which human evolution has happened. This is very small span of time in which the social media and the mobile smartphone has taken over. So cutting short of that, but I had a very good advice from one of the mentors that that will help in all these situations. I mean, in the changing situation, different problems. One is that it has been told to me like make sure that there are energy gain sectors that you are assuring. So there will be always energy sinks and there are energy gains. So it's okay, there are a number of different problems which will keep on occurring which are not even predictable, but at least we should make sure that the fields in which we definitely gain energy, we should secure that. If you are not doing that and only there is an energy drain that is happening, then for sure there you will get ruined. So as madam also said, friends, families and the things from which we really get solace and happiness, we need to secure those sources. Then whatever situation come in, whatever stage of life, probably we will be able to deal with it. So,
Thank you so much. I think it's bullseye. The importance of having an activity or a group of people from where we get our energy, we get energized, I think is so important to maintain all through life. Absolutely.
And
Thank
it
you.
can vary for different people. So there
Yes,
should be
absolutely.
introspection that should happen, which are our energy gains.
Yes. And it might even change at different life stages. What was energizing me a decade ago may no longer. But as long as I'm making the effort to know what is giving me that energy and finding it, I'm good. Thank you so much.
There's one dimension which I thought influences this whole issue of crisis or feeling of crisis is one of identity. I think that influences our feeling of belonging and so in different stages of life, what is the identity that one has? identifies and what's the identity that one seeks and what's the identity or being part of something or being on your own having an identity. So that question of identity gets very fluid, and coming to terms with that and grasping that thing, whatever is in your mind and being cognizant of it, aligning it with your, your ecosystem where you operate. I think that is a struggle, and when there is a disalignment, then we feel like we are undergoing a crisis.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Good evening. This is more of something that it's also related to what the gentleman before me just spoke about identity, and I would like to ask all three of you what your thoughts will be regarding something that I'm going to share. Throughout my life, I've been very passionate about the sciences and the arts as well. And I have worked for some time as an engineer, and I have worked for some time as a performing artist as well. However, I'm currently at this stage where I feel financial security is of prime importance given the recent few years and the inflation and all those things. So it is a tussle between the mind and the heart. And what words of advice would you have for someone who is in their 30s, early 30s? Or, I mean, anybody of any age can have this. So, yeah, just words of advice.
From whom, dear?
From all three.
Follow your heart. That's always the best thing to do, I think.
I think, again, take it with a pinch of salt, maybe a handful of salt. But I think if you're working as an engineer and in the evening you're performing or learning how to perform, I think that might be one option. The other might be to see if there is any intersection, right? And actually, there are a lot of intersections. There might be a startup building for performing arts, or building for, or a non-profit, which employs all sorts of, or at least most of the skills that you have. Try to look for something like that. It might be difficult, but, I think there are more avenues than ever before where intersections play a role. I think Sam would be a great person to talk about it, perhaps.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because that's a dilemma that I faced throughout my life, and in some ways I still face today. But the gap between the two has been narrowing and narrowing. And I think you have to live with the tension. You may not have an easy answer today or tomorrow or even a year, but live with both tensions. And it's not a feeling that you can't find an answer either. You will sort of unconsciously attract those situations which allow that. So, I mean, as Akash said, there are so many spaces. When you were saying engineering and dance, I was thinking, I used to teach at Srishti. This was the job that I took up to feed my cats. And I had to travel 4 hours a day. But Srishti, for example, we love to teach students mathematics, complex ideas through dance, through movement. And I think the world is moving into the space where we need creative ways of learning to fuel more innovation, to fuel the hemispheres coming together. So I feel like if you keep that quest and you acknowledge that it's really difficult, and maybe it is your life's purpose, but it's a beautiful one that will benefit lots of people like you if you keep at it. That's all I can say. I feel I've also reached that position where suddenly that abundance has come. And I mean, my parents are testament here. They can tell you how many times I've cried about money to them. My therapist, which Mamta was, how many times I've brought having no money to therapy. But eventually, after many years, it has come.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time and we need to close here. We do hope, no matter what age or decade you're in, that you found something that you can apply and reflect on and share with somebody of a different age group, that you can share with them the nuggets that you've got here. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to ask you to give a big round of applause to our panelists, our possible Lata, Akash, Samita, and to yourself for making it here this evening.